hear me? Yeah, okay, good. One thing about extension is they teach you don't have to use a microphone. So my name is Erika Crowl. I'm the ag agent in Baltimore County. I actually originally started in nutrient management, so I was also sitting here about a decade ago doing the same thing. And then I transferred over to ag agent once our senior guy had retired. So we're going to talk about basic soils. I'm sorry, this is not very exciting. There are a couple like review questions in there just to kind of get your brain thinking about when you have the exam, which is what, August?
August.
Yeah, okay. So just a little interactive stuff to maybe keep you awake. Okay. So we're going to talk about the definition of soil, how it's formed, the physical and chemical properties, and then briefly discuss about soil surveys, because you guys, if you have not already, you will be using the web soil surveys when you are creating these nutrient management plans. Wow.
You might just have to.
We went back real fast. Okay, so soil has this really long, complex definition, but basically soil is made up of solids, liquids, and gases, and we classify them as horizons or layers. They have different processes that happen to create these soils. Okay. So what's in soil? We have minerals, water, gases, organic matter, obviously our plants, the roots from the plants, the animals that live within the soil, and also tons of different microbes. Fun fact, there's more soil microorganisms in a teaspoon of healthy soil than there are people on this earth, which seems hard to believe these days because this place is overpopulated, but if you have healthy soils, you have a lot of good microorganisms in there creating those healthy soils and the organic matter. So there's 5 soil forming factors that we will talk about in depth. The parent material, the climate, the landscape, the position where your soils are located, the organisms within the soils, and then time. So parent material, this is kind of your overall basis of how your soil starts to form. We obviously, thousands and thousands of years ago, we had these big glaciers and rocks and things broke down over time. And so this is kind of your parent material. Very few soils are formed directly just from the rocks. So there's multiple things that go in to this parent material. Climate, so we live in kind of a rainy area, right? Sometimes it's rainy, sometimes it's really dry, but typically we have a significant amount of rain here, and it does get warm. So when it is rainy and it's warm, it speeds up those microbes. It kind of brings them to life. They're breaking down the soil that's in there and kind of making different aggregates and clumping them all together. And when we have that freeze and thaw process, it's weathering that parent material, weathering the rocks, and so they're breaking down even further. Landscape, so we sometimes, if you guys, some of you are out in Western Maryland, you guys are on like mountains, the top of the mountain, top of the slopes, we can have a lot of erosion, which then kind of leaches all this material down to the bottom. So soils that are at the base of slopes have more topsoil, more organic matter. And then you have some soils that are located, say, on the shore. Kayla and I were just in an area last week that was underwater, basically. The water has risen so high, the soils can't even see, it's just a marshland. So at that point, they're kind of not really good soils. You're not going to be growing a lot of stuff there. They're just habitats for other creatures. South-facing slopes warm up faster. So again, we want those healthy microbes within our soil, kind of breaking down the organic matter and feeding these plants during that time. There's lots of animals. So we have the animals that are on top of the soil, so they're walking across it back and forth. They can cause compaction. We also have little rodents that live, underground, and they're moving around, creating more pore space, more air space. The plants we talk about, Chuck was talking about cover crop. We really try to get everybody into that cover crop system. Some of you guys are using like tillage radishes. Those roots are growing down and breaking up the soil, so you don't want that compaction. And again, microbes, that's like kind of the root of really healthy soils. They're decomposing that organic matter, cycling the nutrients at all times. So time, this takes hundreds of years to develop really good soils. You can't always have the best soils depending on your location. But if you are really working on that organic matter, that's what's really going to help you in the end when you're trying to have profitable crops growing there. And this all happens through the soil forming processes. So, adding material, leaching, the loss of material, moving stuff around, translocation, and also transformation as it changes over time when it's breaking down. We really hound on organic matter because that is the root of healthy soils. So again, cover crops. At the end of the season, we're letting them, winter die. We are personally killing them off. So we have the biomass and the residuals of it to create that stable end product of the organic matter. And you'll notice kind of further north, if you go up to Vermont or Maine, they have soils that have they're really dark, rich looking because they have a lot of organic matter because it's really cold up there. So things aren't really breaking down quickly. So as you get further south, you're going to have less of that. And the soil types obviously change. So you want that soil organic matter because it's increasing their water holding capacity. So you're not, if you're on the shore and you have a lot of sand, you're constantly having to irrigate, putting in the nutrients. You're off of that and you have higher soil organic matter, you can hold that water, hold the nutrients, and you have the higher cation exchange capacity, which we'll talk about later on. And it just overall improves the soil structure. Horizons. We have 6 different soil horizons. We are going to really kind of talk about just topsoil, the subsoil, and then the parent material, but you need to know these. They also have another like subset of horizons, but these are the main 6. So the top is the organic horizon. Then you have the A horizon, which is basically your topsoil. Then the E, which is the alluviated horizon. So you will notice that it can get a little gray and whitish because it's when you have leaching of iron and aluminum down through the soil, it creates that gray area. And then the V horizon, which is where everything is leached to. So that's where all the clays, iron and aluminum have gone to. The C horizon is the parent material. So that's where the rocks have kind of settled and they've broken down a bit. And then you have the bottom bedrock, which is the R horizon. So your roots are really never reaching below, the B horizon. You don't want it to go all the way down to the bedrock. So here's a picture. On the left is what I was talking about, the leaching. You can see a little bit of the gray where the nutrients have leached out and they're going down to the bottom. And then on the right is a picture of a soil that's has a lot of clay content in it. It's more red, and they call this the sassafras soil.
What are the kind of standard depths for each horizon? know we're losing topsoils. There's not as much there, but is there typical depth for each
It depends on the like basically the top of the organic material. If you don't have a lot of that, then it's gonna be less. It does. There's not really.
Depends
there
on
are,
where you are.
right. It's, yeah. And I would say here, well, and it also depends on your compaction level too. I mean, if you don't have a lot of water and airspace, things are not going to be moving through the soil and pulling it down. I'm just trying to use this and it's not. So soil has physical and chemical properties that we're going to talk about. The first one being texture. So soil texture refers to the soil separates that make up the component of the soil. Chuck talked about this briefly. So we classify soil as sand, silt, and clay. Sand being obviously the larger particles, very gritty, whereas clay is very fine, very sticky. If you ever have done the ribbon test, you can kind of make a long ribbon out of it. It stays together. Have you all seen the triangle before? Right. So this is really important with soil texture because it tells you the availability of your water capacity, how easy if you're gonna be using tillage. If not, the resistance to erosion, your drainage, and any nutrients that are going to be absorbed by the plant in the soil. Okay, here's your first. Sorry, it's at the ceiling. First question. So when you are using this triangle, say that you have 50% sand, you're gonna find 50% sand and follow the lines up. Same with the clay and the silt. So the question is, what's the texture of the soil that's 40% sand, 40% silt, and 20% clay? Yeah, exactly. So see how it just kind of meets in the middle, loam, and that is a very common soil type around here, soil texture. We classify soils by coarse, moderately coarse, medium, moderately fine, and fine soils. So coarse, again, is obviously the sandier soils, very gritty, are not going to hold together. Moderately coarse will hold together under gentle pressure. So these are kind of like your sandy loams. Your mediums are smooth, so this is kind of like your siltier type with loams. They're smooth but not sticky. So you can do a ribbon test, but it's not going to really stay together. The moderately fine can be sticky and feels kind of plasticky. So these are like silty clays. And then the fine are anything with more than 40% clay. They will form a full ribbon. Also, if you can make a ball out of it, and it becomes a hard, compacted clod easily. So the effect of soil texture on soil properties, everything kind of goes together except the erosion. So water capacity, nutrient retention, leaching potential. As you would think with very sandy soils, they're not going to hold any water or any nutrients that you're giving them for a very long time. They have a high leaching potential. And then when you get to the full clays, they're going to have, they're holding it all together. But with the erosion, because sand is so heavy, it tends to not erode as easily as if you had a more siltier type soil. Because the siltier stuff is kind of up, it suspends easily and will just kind of move on with the high waters. You can see here, this farm had pretty heavy erosion issues. And this is kind of why we preach in like soil conservation, doing best management practices, putting in waterways, so you don't have that erosion issue. Structure. So this is kind of the aggregation of soil in like particles together. If you go outside and you have a screen, Trish Steinhilber used to make us do this. She would like give us this big screen, you'd go outside, put some soil in it, and like shake it out and see what the soil structures that you had there. So the more clay and organic compounds that you have, the more they're going to bind together. And this determines the pore space. So there's 6 different structure classifications. We are really kind of looking at the granular. That's what we want. They're pretty easy. You have a lot of air and pore space while also having the soil together. This is where your root structures go through. The deeper you get in the layers, you're going to have more prismatic and massive, kind of clumpy areas. And that's not what you want. You want the granular structure. If you have a lot of compaction, like the plow pan area, you're going to get a more of like a horizontal structure. So organic matter plays a big role in this. You can see that we have a lot of water kind of in this top field up here that has been held. We don't want that. And so we have to have different management practices to change these over time. And you can see at the bottom, this field must be really compacted because all these roots are laying on top of the soil, that they're not even underneath. Porosity, so this is space between the aggregates and the particles. So we want our 50% minerals and 50% air and water. It'd be nice if it's 25 and 25. That's really never happens, but that would be the like most ideal soil. So to have that balance, we have, if you look underneath the microscope, which I'll show you in the next picture, you'll see the different pores. So we have macro pores, which are the large pores, lets the rainwater irrigation run through it quickly. The mesopores, which are kind of the medium, they store all the nutrients. And then the micropores, which is kind of where you get with all the clay because it holds the water quite close together, and it's hard for you to have good drainage in these types. So this is kind of just under a microscope, you can see the large pores with the clay, some silt particles in there as well, and the large sand particles. So you'll need to know the formula for porosity. So basically, it's you take the bulk density and particle density, multiply by 100, and then to get the percentage, and take 100% out of it. So I want you to do this. You can use your. Are they allowed to use calculators on the Zoom? No. No?
Yes.
I think
Yes.
so. Okay. Well, use your cell phone. So this has a bulk density of 1.7 grams per cubic centimeters and a particle density of 2.68 grams per cubic centimeter. So what is the percent porosity, aka the pore space? So I gave you the formula on the bottom. And this is stuff you would get out of a lab. This isn't something you're going to be doing every day in your office, but it's also good to know. Any ideas? Can't do it. What'd you say? Yeah. That's it. 35% pore space. So is that, if we went back to this, is that 35% pore space good or bad? So you would like more, right? Because 35 is less than 50%. So that's probably a pretty compacted soil type. So our bulk density is the weight of the soil, like the total weight of the soil. And then we have particle density, which is just the soil solids. And this is affected by the porosity, right? So the more porous the soil, the lower bulk density you're going to have. If you have any soils that are more than 1.6 grams per cubic centimeters, you have pretty compacted soils, and the roots are not going to go through that at all. So it's something to keep in mind. This just shows you that, you know, the more organic matter that you have, native grassland, something that hasn't been run over and tilled a ton, you're going to have a lower bulk density than if you would have a field that has been tilled pretty heavily for a long time.
Slides are not in the handout.
Yes. So I had so in extension, I didn't update them till Sunday, so that's why they have the old slides. But I'm gonna send out the new slides so you guys, yeah. Brian wanted these on Friday or on Thursday, and we were in a meeting all week, and I was like, "Here's our old slides, but I haven't updated them, so I'm sorry." Okay, another question for you. So if you have an aggregate that has a volume of 124 cubic centimeters and a dry weight of 138 grams, what's the bulk density? Trying to not make you fall asleep. Anyone? Yeah. So 1.1, 1.2 grams. So these are, again, these are just questions you're gonna see when you take your, I actually think these are off the practice exam. Okay, so our last physical property of soil is the water holding capacity. Affected by the porosity that we've been talking about, the soil texture, organic matter. So the more clay, more organic matter, the more water holding capacity you're gonna have in the soils. And they're classified by three different classes. So saturated, field capacity, and permanent wilting point. So what you want is your soils to be at field capacity. So it's broken up evenly with the solids, your water, and air. Saturated soils, if you have too much water, right, you're going to have root rot. You're not going to have profitable plants. If you are meeting the permanent wilting point, then you have dried up everything, and you probably have really sandy soils, and so you're going to have to irrigate a lot. Okay, I think this is the last question. So we've talked about the structure, texture, bulk density, porosity, water holding capacity. So if you have a soil that has the soil physical property that describes the proportion of sand, silt, clay-sized particles in the soil is called. Hey, you guys are smart. Okay, so soil drainage, if any of you work with soil conservation and RCS, you guys do a lot with soil drainage. So this is the rate of water removal during a growing season. There are 6 classes of drainage. I did not put them in there, but just something for you guys to know. And when you look at a soil, like a profile, the more gray, like we said, probably the poorer the drainage. And that's when you see it in the subsoil, not in the topsoil layers. Right. chemical properties, we're going to talk about pH and the cation exchange capacity. These are the two things that when you get a soil test back, it's kind of my first indicator that I look at on a soil test. I don't even look at the nutrients that are already in there. I look at pH first and then the CEC. So I'm sure you all know that, you know, soil's the measure, or soil pH is the measure of acidity and alkalinity in the soils. We want our soils to be between 5.5 and 7. That's what is required for most plants. That's, you would see pretty, we don't have too much acidic soils up where I'm in Baltimore County, so I don't have a lot of acidic soils. The further kind of to the shore you can, because things are leaching out quickly. And this affects the availability of the nutrients in the soil. I'm sure you guys have all seen this chart before. And you can see here that when you're between 5.5 and 7, this is when all of the right nutrients are available to the plants. So if you get too acidic, go to the left, you're going to have more iron than you are like nitrogen, phosphorus, and potassium. And then if you get too high, it kind of goes the other way. So you want to hit right in the middle. That's when everything is available. Sometimes you'll see if your soils are too acidic, but it says like you have a decent amount of phosphorus or potassium in there. It's probably there. It's just not available to the plant. So I always tell my farm, I have a lot of pasture guys, they don't want to really fertilize, and that's fine. The cheapest thing you can do is to add lime to your fields, because that's when all those nutrients that are already there are more available to your plants. So we have limestone that is calcitic, source of calcium, or dolomitic, so source of magnesium. And then when guys ask me, you know, what should I put down? We look then again to see how much calcium, how much magnesium is already available in the soil. So if you need more calcium, I'm gonna say you should probably put down calcitic limestone versus dolomitic limestone. There's also, you know, lime takes 6 months sometimes to actually be activated in the soil. That's why we say do it fall, you know, before you're actually going to be fertilizing the next year. So it also, you have, you can get different types of like grades of it to see how fast it can act. You have fast acting lime that is like powder and can burn your fields up really fast if you just put it down in the middle of summer. Or you have a more of a granular limestone that's slower releasing. The CEC, so this is the ability of the soil to hold onto those positively charged ions, which we call cations. And we're talking about like calcium, magnesium, potassium, sodium, ammonium, aluminum, hydrogen. So think of it as like a magnet. So when you have these roots down there, you have clay particles that are negatively charged. They're on the ends of the root zones, and you want these cations to go to the clay ions and kind of balance it out and then feed those plants those nutrients. So when you see it on your soil test, it's in a scale, and it'll tell you it's between 1 and like 50. So the low CECs are what we consider between 1 and 10 milliequivalents per 100 grams. So this is a high sand content, low organic matter, low soil pH, not a very productive field, but it can be easily changed with lime. Now our high CEC soils are going to be between 11 and 50 milliequivalents per 100 grams. These are kind of, you don't want 50 ever, because this is basically straight clay. So it's going to be holding all that water, holding some of the nutrients, but not allowing it to actually go to the plants. So around here, we like to see, I've seen up to 25, but between 11 and 15 is what you would like. That's pretty much in the middle. So just kind of something when you're looking at your soil tests to think about. The wet soil survey. So back in the day, we were given this giant book of all the soil types in your county. And then Trish would say you can look make your nutrient management plan and mapping off of that. Now we're lucky that we can actually do the wet soil survey. Do we have internet?
Should.
Maybe? Oh, no. Okay. Just kidding. Okay, what we want to do. So when you type in, you just Google web soil survey, it'll come up, you hit the says start WSS. You can pick an area wherever, it could be a field, this happens to be my farm, and it'll tell you all the soil properties that are on the place. And it'll also tell you about permeability, erodibility, do you have any hydric soils. We also, if you don't know the yield of a field, so someone's planting corn and they've never planted it in this field before, you can go on here and it'll tell you the average yield that you can get off this field. And that's what you're supposed to put in the plan if you don't already have recorded yields for those fields. Soil conservation uses it a lot for putting in best management practices, especially for, it can tell you about the drainage. There's endless amounts of information on here. You can put in crop rotations and it'll tell you basically how to farm on it. It's pretty cool. It's, I don't know, something fun to play around with if you're bored, I guess. You know, during the summertime when you're not planning a lot, that's when you do it. So definitely visit this and kind of play around with it. Yeah. Has anyone used Soil Survey yet? Yeah. It's good information on there. Okay, so if I haven't bored you to death, basic soils. Do you guys have any questions? Feel free to reach me whenever. A tidbit about getting ready for your exam, find somebody that's already taken the exam in the area and like partner up with them and study. I did that. I had like a little cohort of people. So something to think about doing.
Where's Dwight?
Where's what?
Dwight.
He just walked. He was in here.
Oh, Mia's is here.
This for